Hello, everyone, and welcome to the July 8th edition of the Gateway API Sync. As always, this meeting is governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, boiling down to effectively be nice to one another. So please do be nice to one another. As we're having conversations, please do feel free to use the hands raised or the raise hand feature in Zoom, as that helps us to organize questions, interjections, and so forth, and keep things flowing. This is an open agenda meeting. There's only one, it's big. Oh, no, there's a couple things added now. Open agenda. So at any time during the meeting, you're welcome to put something on the agenda at the bottom. If we can get to it today, we will. If not, we can roll it over to the next meeting. Yeah, I think I see a couple of new faces. So we'll give a couple of seconds if anybody's new or just coming back or whatever wants to introduce themselves, say what you're working on, or just say hi. We'll give a couple of seconds for that. Please do. We'd love to hear from you.
Everyone, I'm Caleb. Looking like there's a few familiar faces in the call here. I'm working with II, and we're doing some stuff around conformance. And so, if you're familiar with API Snoop for the Kubernetes project, we're working on gateway-api.apisnoop.io, which you can go to today, and you can see the progress we're trying to track with the great work around conformance for Gateway API. Yeah, hello.
Hello, very cool. Thank you for joining.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm a new contributor just popping in to see what's going on. I'm looking for any good first issues or things like that. But yeah, I'm just definitely here to check things out and see how it works here in networking. Thanks.
Very cool. Welcome. You may find good first issues a little challenging. The main thing I would suggest, if you haven't already, is just that because Gateway API is an API, a specification without an implementation, take some time and go to our website, go to the implementations page, and familiarize yourself with whichever one seems to make the most sense to you, because that familiarity will make it much easier to jump in and contribute to issues and stuff like that. And if you need any help with that, let us know in the we have SIG Network Gateway API in Kubernetes Slack, and you can always ask questions in there and say like, hey, I don't understand this, or I'm looking for something like this. We'll be happy to help you out.
Yeah, welcome. I'd also say feel free to ping me if you're looking for something to do. Sometimes we run across things where we just need someone to do work. Sometimes we get those labeled as needs, good first issue. But if we know that somebody's already out there looking, we can let you know directly too.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Otherwise, we'll kind of move on. Feel free to pop in.
I'm in the same boat as Caleb, helping with the conformance stuff. Had a catch up with Nick a few weeks back, so it's good to see you, Nick.
Yeah, it's great to see you both here, and I was just playing around with that Gateway Snoop page. That looks amazing.
Yeah, it's a very first draft. There's a lot of stuff that we need some feedback from the community to help us to make it as accurate as possible.
Very cool. Nick, would you mind dropping a link to that thing in the
Yep, will do. Just about to.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, welcome. Cool. Anybody else, or shall we start the agenda? Going once. Twice sold. Okay. Cool. All right. We do have. We'll see how it goes. It started small. There's people adding stuff. That's good. Oh, there's the Gateway API Snoop. I'll check that out. Let's start with a discussion about our upcoming v1.2 release. I think maybe since I'm pretty sure Rob filled in a lot of this and probably has a flow in mind. Rob, if you want to kind of
Sure.
go on this and start taking it away.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think between now and what we're calling our enhancement freeze, 3 weeks from today, I think the actual date is July 30. I'm going to say California time, but some, there's going to be some flexibility here. I know that we're already July 9 in some parts of the world. So yeah, but coming soon, 3 weeks away, we are looking at saying that all GEPs either need to be in or they're out of scope for this release. And so that really means we've got a lot of work to do and not a lot of time to do it. I do want to thank everyone who's gotten some work in already, but if you don't, please either get to it as soon as you possibly can or call out and ask for help ASAP as well. But we do want to get as much as we possibly can into this release. First up on the list is named route rules. This has been owned, I think, primarily by Key, but others have been pushing for this too. I think it's on track. We're GEP's already good to go. We're on to implementation. I don't think there's much to the implementation either, but because we're on to implementation, there's not much for this particular bit of the release. So that one's good. The next one, percentage-based request mirroring. There's been a few comments on there. I don't think any are particularly controversial, but Shane, if you mind opening this one up, I want to call out the bits that I think Flynn raised on this.
Bottom
Flynn had
comment.
suggested. What's that?
Just telling Shane it was the bottom comment. That's
Oh
all.
yeah, thank you. Yes. So yes, so the idea that Flynn had, he was rather unhappy in the last meeting with the idea that we would add additional complexity for everybody to solve the more complex case. And the more complex case is a non-whole percentage. So basically a non-int percentage. The idea being that in most cases, if you're wanting to mirror a percentage of traffic, it's going to be 0 to 100 whole numbers. But there are some very real cases where you want more precision than that. Of course, most of you would say, well, you should use a float, but floats and Kubernetes do not mix well. And so here we are. And so Flynn's suggestion is, hey, why don't we just have a whole number? That's what most people can use. And if they want more than that, they can specify a fraction. I think that's entirely fine. I don't feel strongly about this one. I just want to make sure that we can represent something more precise than a whole number. So this seems like a reasonable compromise to me, but any other opinions on this topic are welcome.
Roger that. That's
Cool.
3178, the pull request.
Cool. All right, the next one down the list is backend MTLS config. This one is a big topic. This is being led by Marcin. He presented it at the last meeting, which was at an earlier time slot last week. But it has not gotten any feedback on the actual PR. And given the scope of this PR, I would really, really encourage more people to take a look at it as soon as you get time. I know that there was a holiday for many people in the US, which would explain why it didn't get many eyes if you happen to be here. But yeah, this is a big one. We've talked about it at a high level. I've already looked at this before Marcin. Marcin also works at Google, so I've already looked at this before he made the PR, and am largely in favor with his proposal. But want to see other people's feedback before adding my own. Yes, you're right. I should encourage. Yeah, I think it is ready for review, so I'll ask him to actually move it. But yes, I think comments are very, very much welcome at this point.
Cool. That one's 3180. TLS configuration, gateway merging, and hierarchy. So
Okay,
the
sweet.
merging one has
I
been.
think
Go on.
no, yeah. I mean, I feel like this is going to take a huge chunk of today's meeting because I don't know. I have lots of thoughts. I think a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on this one. And I want to start those thoughts by saying a big thank you to Dave for continuing to push through this gap despite the 200 plus comments it has received already, separate
And how
docs.
long
This
it's
is
been
this
hanging
is
out.
a complicated topic, and not many people would have the patience and perseverance to push through it. So thank you, Dave, for continuing to persevere. And I
100%
really do
agreed.
hope this is the release that we can get something in. So yes.
That said, we
So yeah,
probably need to pop open the other doc, Shane.
Yeah.
that's so basically I had left this open-ended comment on Dave's PR of, like, because we've got all these other parallel things, maybe we should like have some ideas that encompass more of these things. And Dave had the good idea of, well, why don't you write down your ideas? And I created a doc. And here are my ideas that are not, this is not meant to be exclusively my ideas, by the way. This is based on some discussions. I got some inspiration talking with Nick. The last idea in this list is heavily inspired by a conversation from Nick, with Nick. And then, the first one is basically heavily inspired by the GEP as proposed by Dave. So there's a few variations here, but maybe if you jump up top, and I am getting completely okay. I have these great lights in this meeting room where the lighting just completely goes off every now and then. Okay, so I wanted to provide just a little bit of context on how we got to this point. Gateway merging, I think, is a great idea. I'm seeing maybe 90+% of implementations of Gateway API implementing some kind of merging already, so there's clearly demand. And we're also seeing a lot of usage and demand for TLS route. And so this particular release cycle, we've considered in scope moving both gateway merging and TLS route forward. But as we start to look at and review both of those, oh, well, there's a lot of overlap. And as you start to think about L4 routing, and as you start to think about some other things, wow, we're creating a lot of things that make sense in isolation, but maybe when combined, they're going to collide not well. And so like you can review this gap, you can review that gap, and they all make very compelling cases in isolation, but maybe not together. And one of my concerns is that we'll provide, 3 different ways to do roughly the same thing and create more complexity than we really needed. So the starting point that I wanted to have here was a bunch of goals. And before I go through those goals, I think, Nick, you've got a thought.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that one of the things that Rob and I have been talking a lot about for a while, and are both really worried about, is what we like to talk of as complexity budget. Any API has like a finite amount of complexity it can contain, and like the more complex the API gets, the harder it is to understand, the harder it is to implement, and the harder it is to use. And what we're worried about is sort of unintended combinatorial explosions in the complexity budget. So where we add feature A that's like a little bit complex but okay, and feature B that's also a little bit complex but okay, but when you multiply them together, all of a sudden you have like a cross product kind of situation where you get like way more complexity than either one by themselves, or even it's not additive anymore, it's multiplicative. That's what we're really, really worried about. And that's one of the reasons why we want to address some of these things that we have been worried about for a while with all at once. I could see why it might seem like, but where is all this coming from? All of the things that Rob has mentioned are things that he and I have been really worried about in terms of complexity budget for some time. And so this is kind of like that worry breaking the surface and finally turning into like something that's a bit more consumable for people who haven't been having a lot of conversations back and forth about this.
Yeah, that great context. Thank you. And yeah, I think Tim is the one who really coined the complexity budget in Kubernetes, and some of Tim Hawken, to be clear, and some of his reviews of our releases have been, yeah, you're really starting to push the bounds of that complexity budget. You got to be a little careful. And I think that's been very good and apt feedback for us. So yeah, with that said, I think gateway merging as it's proposed would add basically another level of optional, but another level of hierarchy to the API. So anytime you add another layer of hierarchy to an already layered API, we need to be careful. So there's a few things, many things actually, that could potentially benefit from hierarchy, something in this ballpark. I don't know that they can all be accomplished by one thing, but many, I think, could. So I tried to write down the goals that I was aware of that were at least in this ballpark and potentially solvable by the same kinds of things. I am very, very open to additional goals, additional things that we've talked about that seem like they could be in scope for this. Obviously, the very first one was where we started this discussion, merging gateways together. And then as we dug deeper into that, it was, well, because we want to support more gateway listeners than the 64 that we allow for a single gateway. Okay. Then next up, we wanted to provide a mechanism for third-party components to actually generate those listeners. Why do you need so many listeners? Because we're generating them. So those are kind of the first three, and they're all pretty tightly coupled. Then you start to go back into the history of this API and even more recent feature requests. We're seeing a lot of people come back and say, hey, I really want my app owners to be able to manage certs. And we had that in a very early version of this API, and then no, that's too complicated because every route can, like 10 different routes can all claim the same host name. Where does the cert live? It was confusing, right? So we pulled it out. And we said, oh, automation can handle that. You can use something like Cert Manager. It'll just be magic. It just kind of, shoved it away for future us, I guess. But that problem and use case still very much exists, and it's something that we should consider as we're considering adding another layer of hierarchy in this vicinity. And then very related to that is just the idea of I want to have some kind of centralized ownership of domains and say that this domain is owned by this namespace, for example. And those namespaces could also define TLS, routing configuration, etc. And then finally, we're also seeing demand for SNI-based routing, which is currently covered by TLS route. But of course, SNI-based routing is also covered by gateways. So there's some overlap there, and especially if we add an intermediate layer, there will be even more overlap. And then there's been a lot of discussion, or at least maybe not a lot, but some discussion about what on earth we're doing for L4 routing, since we have all these L4 routes in our API and they've just kind of gotten stuck forever. How do we move those forward? Maybe we could remove one of the required layers or rethink that. This offers an opportunity to help there. And then finally, there's been, in early days, HashiCorp actually was really instrumental in pushing forward an idea known as route delegation, which would have been very similar to what Dave is proposing here, but instead of at the gateway layer, at the route layer, where you can say, I want to delegate this specific path to a different namespace, and you can basically merge a bunch of routes together. This could potentially allow for path-based delegation to different namespaces, which we're currently missing in our API, but is a legitimate use case. Okay, so that's a ton of goals. I'll pause there. I think Candace has a hand, and if anyone else does, feel free as well.
I just would like to express a concern that there's too many goals here and that not all of them are related to hierarchy in Gateway. So maybe we could reorder it to those that we we know are related to hierarchy. And I mean, I wouldn't want to slow down the progress of Dave's GEP by including all of these other things in with that, to be designed along with that. So my request is to take some of these things out. And I don't know if other people agree with that or not.
No. I think that's entirely fair, and I think I mislabeled this as goals, where I was really just trying to come up with the term feature requests potentially in this vicinity, right? Like, not necessarily that we're going to get all of these goals, but we should at least be aware of things that could potentially be solved by this. We may not cover all of them. Dave's suggestion of use cases, yeah, that's a good one. I think going back to what Nick mentioned earlier, the idea of a complexity budget, I feel pretty strongly that we can maybe add one more layer of hierarchy to this API, and that's it. So if you have, route delegation, that makes sense on its surface. You have gateway merging, that makes sense on the surface, and you have to pick one, or you have to pick one additional layer of hierarchy. Maybe it can include both of those concepts. I don't know, but I feel like we can't just indefinitely add layers to this API. So being very, very targeted in what we're adding, so we can cover as many of these use cases as possible within an additional layer, is my goal. But yes, I agree that there are more goals here than we could possibly accomplish, and I don't want to unnecessarily delay or complicate this process. I think, Nick, you're next.
No, Dave is next.
For the DNS thing, it would be interesting to think about splitting that off from gateways, and then it being just like a logical construct that then could be consumed by Gateway API, and then potentially something else.
Rob and I talked a bit about that, and the problem, one of the problems with any method that we choose to handle delegating domains down to specific namespaces or to anything other than what we have today, and even today, the biggest problem that we have is that domains are a cluster scoped thing, and every single thing that we have put them in currently is namespace scoped. So there's currently no cluster scoped way to slice up a domain space and delegate it down to a namespace that then you can take that delegation and keep delegating it further down. I agree that we definitely need some way to handle that. I mean, Costin raised the query that there also is a larger problem of delegating a domain to a cluster to start with, which I think we need to leave aside. Gateway API needs to be focused on stuff inside one cluster, not multi-cluster stuff. That is really important. But yeah, so I think this that is, you're 100% right. That is definitely worth talking more about. I think that, but the problem there is that to handle the domain stuff like properly, it really needs a cluster scoped object. And every time I say the words cluster scope object, or every time we talk about gateway class because it's cluster scoped, everyone's like, I hate cluster scope things. They suck for RBAC. They suck for users. You can only have one. You have to give people a really high, you're basically giving people sysadmin access to be able to do that. Yeah, and people have been really reluctant to add more cluster scoped things to the API. So that's why, and I don't think that the sort of the handling the cluster scoped case is necessarily preclusive of some of the stuff that we've got in the actual options for how we do that once you actually get it down to a gateway. So that's what. So those ones are the other ones I think. I see you, Shane. There's just one other thing I wanted to address before I hand over to you. I agree with you, Candice, that this is a lot of goals. But yeah, like all of those goals are in there because they all do have implications for hierarchy. Like TLS route, I know you're working, Candice, you're working on trying to get that to GA, but if we take TLS route to GA and then we add some other hierarchy thing at the same time, there's a very good chance that we will get that multiplicative complexity problem that I was talking about, where and I would argue that TLS route as it stands actually has a bit of a complexity problem, a hidden complexity problem, because of the interaction with the TLS mode. That's a separate thing, but and that's one of the other things that we're talking about, trying to remove complexity from the thing, is that right now there are very unclear interactions between TLS route and the TLS mode. So yeah, sorry, Shane, over to you.
No, I am doing a time check because we are halfway through the meeting. I think it would probably be good, since this is obviously, if this could go on and there's a lot to be said. I think we should prioritize more asynchronous conversations. We should probably, I don't know if Mattia just took on trying to help move TLS route forward, and I'm not sure how clued into this he is. So I think that I'll ping him on here.
Yeah, I think he's looked at this. I've at least mentioned it to him, but yeah, another ping would be great. There have been a lot of comments. I think it would probably be useful to have maybe a separate meeting just to dig through this more. If there are people that are interested in this area that want more discussion, like again, we're 3 weeks out, and that's not a lot of time to get a really big topic settled. So I really do want to make sure we're spending that time. I know Dave's done a ton of work to get it to this state. So I think maybe the next follow-up is just some kind of standalone meeting, just so we can make some real progress on this, because like you said, Shane, I think there's enough content in here where we could we could spend a full hour digging into it and talking through potential
We've done that
options.
before for other things, and I think it may be warranted here. If people don't feel like we're making much progress asynchronously, having a synchronous talk just for this sounds good. Does anybody want to organize that? Take on that action item and get that organized?
I'm happy to give it a crack. I suspect that it will be tough to get a time slot. Also, I am out on holiday for 10 days, sort of by the end of this week. So I will get onto that today and send out some options. If you would like to be involved in that meeting and you're here today, please just add your name below that action item, and I'll make sure you're on the contact list there. Yep. Thanks, Shane.
Yeah. Okay. And I think for me, because we did this years ago, I think for me it would be very helpful, just as food for thought, if I heard more people that come to this conversation that have a really just could reiterate exactly what they're doing, why they need this, that kind of thing. Like just a reiteration of the interested parties who are like, yeah, we need this to be standardized because of these reasons. I think could be helpful, because when I tried to look at this PR recently, I was overwhelmed. And I imagine other people are having similar response.
I completely agree, and I would ask if anyone could add additional. I forget who suggested use cases. I think it was Dave instead of goals, but whatever it is, if you have more things that you would like to accomplish in this space, please bring it to our attention sooner than later, just so that we can make sure that whatever piece of hierarchy we're adding here can accomplish as many different use cases as possible. I don't want to, introduce this one cool thing and then realize we completely left out this whole area just because we were unaware. Because complexity budget is a real pain, and I don't think we can just keep on adding hierarchy indefinitely.
Roger that. Thank you, everybody. Please do put your name right here if you can see this. If you'd like to be involved in a spinoff or like a spinoff Zoom for that. Request timeouts for gRPC route, which Arco has been on traditionally or historically.
Arco just commented
to say about that one.
Arco just commented to say that he'll try and get a PR out by next week.
Oh, I see it now. Okay, cool. So progress. HTTP route configurable retries. That's Morris, right? Mike Morris.
Yeah, I chatted with Mike just before this meeting. He is going to trying to get something moving on that this week,
Okay.
but he is aware.
Roger that. Timeouts and duration. I could ping Flynn on this.
You know, same thing. Again, he thinks he should be able to get something like this
Okay, you
week.
talked to
So
him.
yeah. And then gateway
And
class
then I've been
supported features.
been tracking this one.
Yeah, this could probably use a bit more discussion in this meeting. Unfortunately, Lior is not here, and Lior has been the one pushing this forward. We've been going down a rabbit hole and then some on this. I think I unfortunately created another rabbit hole of, oh, maybe it would be interesting if we could have this kind of information on other resources than just gateway class. But I didn't. I should not have distracted from the discussion too much. I think there's pretty broad consensus on this one that we want some kind of structure in supported features, and that means it's not graduating in this release. So I guess if you,
May I
yeah, I mean,
suggest we
if
put
you
it in
have,
next and hope that for a time when Lior is here to talk with us about it?
yeah, I mean, that would be great. But I mean, I also want to encourage some async discussion on this because time zones and stuff, and we can't, if we wait till next week to make any forward progress, then this may miss 1.2.
Okay. Just make sure that we kind of don't lose track of it in the next sync. I will continue to try. I've been involved trying to talk through that one. I think, yeah, that could use.
I think the biggest question is like how, if we're going to add structure, currently the list of supported features is a flat list. If we're going to add structure, how much structure and what does it look like? That's really the question that we need to answer to sort of try and refocus the discussion. I'll put a comment on there today to that effect.
Yep.
Roger that. Okay, backend TLS policy. Candace is here.
Yes, I think we already have 3 implementations, and I am continuing to work on the conformance tests. Whitney Griffith, who's here on the call today, said that she would help with conformance tests. I just need to get one normative one up and running, just to use it as an example. And if anyone else would like to help with the conformance tests for backend TLS policy, ping me on Slack. And
I would also say don't be too afraid to put up a draft PR here, because that will make it easier for implementations to pull a draft PR and run the test locally themselves. So yeah, for Cilium, like, probably we could if you have a draft out of the conformance test, then I think we should be able to just pull that and give it a crack and see what happens, because we do already support some stuff. I can't remember if we fully support backend TLS policy, but that's one of the quicker ways to sort of get things moving.
okay, I'm almost there. Just need to find a block of time that I can actually focus on it. So is there anything else that we think needs work on this other than the conformance tests?
No,
actually,
I think that's. Sorry, go ahead.
A little bit of work in the documentation side. I think the GEP needs to be updated.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can always update the documentation right before you ship it, but for sure it seems like the conformance test is the last big missing piece, right?
Yeah, to get to GA, it's a tough one because we require not just that you have conformance tests, but that you have proof that you have 3 implementations passing those conformance tests or more.
Indeed.
So
there'll probably be some interaction with supported features, given that the way that we have proof is that the supported features are in the conformance report. So part of the conformance testing is adding the features and making sure that those are present in conformance reports. So that's sort of the process here, is that we need to have conformance tests so that we can add some supported features, so that the supported features can show up in the conformance reports, so that then we can be like, okay, there's definitely three implementations passing these conformance tests, or supporting this feature is probably a better way to put it.
Roger that. So yeah, if you are interested in implementing this back in TLS policy, please reach out and let us know if you want to help the conformance tests. That's one of the last big things that we have to do, then some documentation cleanup, and then that one can finally move forward. Backend protocol selection on track.
Yeah, there's nothing really. I mean, Dave, thank you for owning this, but it's good to go. I think this is as good as done. This is the documentation, final documentation switch, which we only merge when we release. So
Roger that.
Good to go.
TLS route, which we kind of discussed already. Mattia is work owner. I think Mattia and Candace, you to some degree you've been involved with it at least. So that's well underway. I talked with Mattia about this one yesterday, Friday. So I know that he's actively working on that one. Thanks. Somebody dropped a link in there.
Yeah, I just posted that. He had mentioned to me that he was working on that. So if anybody wants to review that.
Yes, please.
Other than me.
How many we got? In cluster gateway config needs work. I don't know if I saw Keith.
I chatted with
I'm
Keith
here.
a bit before too. Oh, he's here? Okay.
I see
Yeah, I'm
Keith.
here.
Okay.
Yeah, my Zoom log. I can't keep track of my Zoom logins, but yeah, working on this. Been busy with a bunch of stuff the past couple of weeks, but plan to start looking into conformance tests today. I think we've got a way forward there, and then it's just documentation. We do have 3 implementations using it: Istio, Envoy Gateway, and Cilium. So should be pretty straightforward.
Roger that.
And I think the headline there is we talked a bit about adding conformance tests, and it's like effectively not possible. Interestingly, this one would be the first thing that we move to sort of GA. We say, look, we can't really conformance test this properly. You just got to say you support it, and it's quite difficult to write a good conformance test for this.
I think we have a way forward on that, actually.
Awesome.
The GEP has a requirement to set the gateway name label on generated resources. So in theory, all we need to do is check for one or 2 common resources with that label. So like a pod or a deployment, and or a service account or something like that. And if we find one of those, we look at all of the labels and annotations on that resource and make sure they're copied over appropriately. It's not the most robust, but it does at least validate that the label is set, and that the labels and annotations are copied to at least one of the resources with that label.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Roger that. Roger that. All right. Sounds good. All right, moving out of the stuff that's kind of specifically 1.2. Rob, you wanted to talk about policy attachment by class name.
Yeah, this is one that I mean, obviously it's relevant to GK because we have multiple class names relating to multiple types of LBs. But one of the things I've been interested in is policy attachments policies in Gateway API are increasingly what I would call multi-tenant, but the idea that they're going to be implemented by multiple different implementations sometimes. Backend TLS policy in particular feels like one, backend LB policy, etc. There are some cases where you might want that to apply only to a specific form of gateway, maybe. So I'm interested in exploring a optional addition to gateway to policy attachments target ref to allow for a class name to optionally be specified. This is meant to be at the start of the discussion. I'm just curious if anyone else is interested in this, would benefit from it. That's all. Or if anyone is strongly against it for some reason.
I can do that for you if you want. I can be strongly against it.
Could this expand to policy on using like a label selector for backends?
It's more like
That's
it's more like I think what Rob is talking about is it's more like a let's have a field in target ref where you can say this policy only applies to gateway classes that have a controller name of this.
I see.
Yeah.
Like
So
additional
as an example, what we've said with backend TLS policy is if a backend TLS policy is attached to a service and you don't support backend TLS policy, you need to know enough to drop or reject that service, right? Like because it's that critical that we need you to either support it or reject it because you don't support it. The only way somebody could get around that if they were using an implementation that supported backend TLS policy and one that didn't would be to either create different services that were basically identical but different names, or to do something like this and say, hey, I want this policy only to target I'll pick on Arco's Envoy Gateway implementation of Gateway API, but not this other one that doesn't support it yet. So that's an example of where this kind of pattern could potentially be useful. But yeah, it's more about not necessarily selecting the target as much as it's selecting the implementation, which is a little funny. But
Keith?
I think there's a couple, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my clarifying questions. Like, so this is not saying I want to set a target ref for all of the and say that this policy applies to all gateways for this gateway class. It's more of a gate to say that this policy applies only to this this gateway class. And if it's okay, gotcha. Okay, I don't hate the idea. I think it's a useful feature. I don't know that I don't know that target ref is the right place for this. Yeah, it's for me, it feels kind of like an awkward UX. It almost feels like this is more akin to like a reference grant or a thing that's limiting like an admin type of policy.
I agree with you, but I'm worried about adding another resource to control an already optional resource.
That's the other concern with that. So it might be one of those least bad option sort of things. I wanted to call that out.
Yeah, 100% worthy calling out. Thanks.
Might be good to call out right in the issue there if you can, Keith, because it might get other people thinking too. It's a good point.
Yeah, sure.
Arco?
Yeah, I think I'm a big +1 for this feature. We've hit this issue in Envoy Gateway. I think we've thought of the problem differently where you just need to add, so policy attachment doesn't fit into the current hierarchy of resources. So that's why the problem arises. When I was thinking of this earlier, I was trying to fit policy attachment into the hierarchy tree, but I think I like this. I like this approach better of targeting a specific gateway within the hierarchy tree way more. So yeah, I'm a big +1 for this. And so what we do today is we just everybody's going to hit this issue. What we do is when we can't find something, we ignore it rather than adding a did not find this status. So yeah, having this would make things more prescriptive for the implementation.
Yeah, I think it is very useful to talk about to think about backend TLS policy there, in that it's actually a really good example where if you have a backend TLS policy pointing at a service, what that's saying is this service needs TLS on the ports that it has open. So if you don't support backend TLS policy and you try to route traffic to the service, it's going to fail anyway, because you're not going to be doing backend TLS, right? Like, so the thing that we are trying to do here is to stop people making mistakes that they could understand from the API constructs that we already have, and just having things mysteriously not work. Because when David Cheney and I first started working on Contour, he always used to use the phrase the ingress murder mystery. When something broke, you had a little murder mystery to be like, which part broke? I don't know. I've got to go and like poke all the different parts and see if it was Colonel Mustard in the study with the candlestick. And so like a lot of what we do with Gateway API is to try and avoid having to have that sort of murder mystery style investigation, where that's why I'm always put this in the status, so that you have API constructs you can check to find out what is broken, rather than having to go and look in logs and pods and stuff like that.
Roger that. We are running a little short on time with a couple issues left. So that one's issue 3175. If you're interested in that, please do chime in, subscribe, be a part of the conversation there. Oh, okay, this one. Okay, yeah, 2 issues left. So, Candace, you wanted to talk about this pull request.
Yes, it was just, do you remember this? It was one
Yep.
that kind of got in and then it was reverted. What do we want to, pursue the solution to this? I don't want it to be forgotten.
Roger that. I can follow up on that one.
I think
I was involved.
There's an extent to which there's some overlap here. This PR overlaps a bit with the discussion about TLS route and how we make TLS route work. I think that this specific part of TLS route and the interaction with protocol type is one of the most confusing parts about the API. It's very, I mean, this is an attempt to make it less confusing by being more specific about it, but the behavior when you have TLS route set to like terminate or pass through is completely different. It really, that's one of the things that really worries me about TLS route, is that, right, because people have made a reasonable use case for the fact that sometimes you want to route by SNI but terminate TLS as well. We haven't been specific enough about what that means. Effectively it means your TLS route is really a TCP route with some extra hostname bits. But because you terminate the TLS stream and then you have to just forward TCP to the backend, that's what TLS route in terminate mode means. But we haven't written that down anywhere in the spec. That's what I meant by confusion there. I think it's probably worth documenting what's there right now and just doing this again. But like one of the reasons that I think this was confusing is that this whole area is confusing, and so putting this in there now is probably good because it at least documents the current state. But we certainly need to clean this up as with whatever we do with TLS route.
Roger that. I'm happy to follow up on this one asynchronously. I appreciate you bringing it up, Candace, so that we don't lose track of it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So, Caleb and Steven have Gateway API Snoop. Do either of you, it's okay if you don't, do either of you want to like share your screen and just kind of walk us through it real quick? We got a few minutes.
Yeah, I can, unless you've already got it up, Stephen.
It's like a quick overview of what you're doing and then just kind of go for it. I'm gonna make you co-host, Caleb.
Yeah, go through it, Caleb.
Oh, I'll just bring it up. The fun part is trying to figure out which window it is. There we go. Okay, I'm assuming you can now see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
See your screen.
Wonderful. Welcome to my computer. Today we're going to be looking at Gateway API.APISnip.io. So, yeah, we've got a few things going on here. We've got the different versions of APIs, Gateway API.
Actually, Caleb, could I get you to maybe if you could show the upstream API snip first, Because I don't know if everyone's
course.
agree with that.
Yes. Appreciate that thought. Yep. So API Snoop is how we've managed to keep track of the Kubernetes conformance progress over the last let's take a look at the progress first. How many years has it been? Since about 1.9, we've got data on the Kubernetes conformance coverage progress, and you can see it's definitely gone up and to the right since the beginning. And so what API Snoop allows us to do is keep track of that progress, figure out which endpoints are either untested, previously tested, old, new, promoted, or without any promotions. And the main thing that we're beginning with on Gateway API Snoop is to replicate the starburst here, which describes the groups of endpoints, their level of stability, and whether they're tested and conformance tested. And yeah, any questions on that before I show you? Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, real quick. This is awesome. Great to see work happening on. Well, actually, I guess you're still on upstream Kubernetes. I'll hold off till I get back to Gateway API.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, because I know a lot of the Gateway API folk haven't looked much at upstream Kube. That was why I wanted you to explain a little bit. But yeah, the point of what API does for upstream is to enable upstream to track like the entire API service of Kubernetes and make sure that over time we move towards the entire API service of Kubernetes being properly tested and conformance tested. It felt when I spoke to Caleb and Steve about this before, it felt to me like having a similar sort of thing for Gateway API would be great. And that's what we want to be moving towards, is that we should have 100% coverage for every core and extended feature, ideally. And that having a way to track where we're at with that coverage would be amazing. So yeah, with that sort of context out of the road, now Caleb, do you want to show Gateway Snoop?
Yeah. So currently we're tracking. We've got a bit of a matrix happening. We're tracking version 1 and 1.1 of Gateway API, and then we've also got a few different implementations that we've just plumbed in to get some overview of how things are currently. And currently it's showing Istio on 1.1, and this is what the data is showing. We're still figuring out the accuracy of it because of how the data gets produced and a few things around that, but this is kind of what we're going for. And so, for example, let's go and jump into only seeing stable, and so then you'll get this. And yeah, that's kind of the idea. You get some good statistics, and you'll get statistics over time, and we'll be adding more providers, more implementations as time goes on.
Yeah,
if you have your hand raised, go ahead.
Yeah,
just to check real quick that we only have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. This is what I was really going to ask earlier. You've been really focused on what I would call like operations, right? Like get, post, put, whatever for a specific resource, right? So which is amazing. Is there any further extension where you could show the coverage of that resource? Because I think we're, for Gateway API, we're more concerned with, do we have a test that fills in this specific field in the API, right? Like instead of, requires a get, or because in at least for Gateway API, the API operation that's used is almost an implementation detail, but the fields that are used in our tests are very important. I don't know if there's a way API Snoop or anything can do that, but that would be, amazing if it could.
Agree. Really quickly off the top of my head, what I can think about that is if there's some way we can get that metadata passed through to a user agent in a test, then we can make it show up here. Happy to consider that further. Nick?
Yeah, so I think, like I said earlier, like I think this looks amazing. I think that it looks at like the default sort of API Snoop dimensions that we're getting from upstream, like Rob said, are not really fitting exactly with Gateway API's sort of model. I think it's probably worth you talking to Lior about the supported features work, because what we really want to be able to do is to move Gateway API. When we talk about features, we talk about what features features in that supported features list are required for a particular thing to work. And so like it would make sense to me that at the end of the day, what we want API Snoop to be looking at is like, what are the features we have available? What conformance tests test them? And does the implementation test those conformance tests, right? Like, is those are the dimensions that we end up with, and the features should be bucketed. So, like the supported features we have should be also bucketed into the level of support. So either core, meaning everyone has to do it, extended, meaning optional, or implementation specific, meaning not conformance tested. We really only care about core and extended in terms of conformance testing surface. So yeah, I think you guys checking in with Lior about supported features and what structure would be useful to you for API Snoop is a really useful data point for that discussion we were talking about with supported features. Because if you need like extra metadata in like what about the feature and what's supported or what conformance tests are associated with it or something, like then that's the place to put it. Probably. The conformance test suite already has support for saying every conformance test says, I need these features to be enabled. And so like we have that data going in one direction, but so I think I would love to see like at some point in the future, this same graph with the innermost rings being core and extended, and then the next layer out being like the actual feature names, and then the conformance test or something like that. And that to me sort of would replicate most of the functionality that we have with the sort of conceptual functionality we have with the upstream API Snoop for Gateway API. I'm happy to talk to you more about this sort of offline because we are out of time now, but yeah, thank you again for getting this started and having a look at this. I know we sort of talked and then I kind of to some extent ghosted you both because like I have been super busy, so I'm sorry about that, but feel free to reach out if you want to catch up with me about this, because as you can tell I have some thoughts. But yeah, but I would also strongly recommend that you try and catch up with Lior about supported features and walk him. Again, I don't know how familiar Lior is with upstream API Snoop, but you may just need to give him that sort of, this is what API Snoop is doing, so that he can understand what we're looking for here. The last thing I want to say is this feels like the sort of the end game of the current table that we have of what implementation support. Right now we've already got Christine has written a script that sort of parses the conformance reports and prints a table showing which implementation support which feature. Like this feels like the best possible version of that to me.
Awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, Shane. I know we're over time.
I very much appreciate both your thoughts, Scott and Nick, and let's make this reality. Keen.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for presenting today. I really appreciate it. If anybody else is interested in seeing more, this is linked in the show notes, or sorry, the sync notes. Thank you all so much for coming today, and we'll see you next time. API Snoop guys, if you need any help or need any support, please do reach out to us in Kubernetes Slack if you get stuck or there's anything you want to ask questions about Gateway API channel. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.